Welcome to Foxy's Lab. I'm Foxy, and over the last decade, I've made basically every smart home mistake you can make. Cloud subscription traps, cloud outages, unboxing devices and then putting them straight into a drawer. I want to make sure you don't make those same mistakes, so I've come up with a set of products I actually recommend to people looking to start a new smart home or expand an existing one. Every smart home company makes the same promise, but only a handful actually keep it. I'm going to tell you which ones before you spend a penny. Some of these products do have affiliate links, but honestly, I've been recommending most of this stuff to friends and family for years. And if you're going to use my links or not, I'd still say get it. I'd just like you a little bit less. So go grab a coffee, I'll get one too, and then we'll get into it. Okay, so what's the promise every smart home company makes? Simple. Buy our stuff and your home will be more convenient. But there are a few things that separates the trustworthy ones from the less trustworthy ones. Comes down to three things. First, local control. Can you use this device without an internet connection? If their cloud server goes down, does your light bulb become nothing more than a bauble? Local control means your stuff keeps working even if the company's having a bad day or goes bust entirely, which happens more often than you'd think in this industry, or if you personally suffer an internet outage. Second, no mandatory cloud accounts. You shouldn't need to hand over your email address and agree to 200 pages of terms and conditions just to view your camera feed. Some devices offer cloud features as an option, and that's fine. Making it mandatory is not. If something's cloud only, it better have a damn good justification for it, and that reason should benefit you, not them. Third, open standards. Does this device speak Zigbee, or Thread, or Bluetooth, or Wi-Fi? Can you use it with different hubs and platforms, or are you locked into one specific ecosystem forever? Open standards means you're buying a device, not a subscription to a walled garden. If you're a Z-Wave fan, I've not forgotten about you, even if you are on the losing side of the protocol wars. Your choices are still valid and I still love you. Okay, potential hot take here. Not every company that ticks these boxes is a scrappy little startup or a niche supplier. Apple, for instance, gets privacy right for the most part. They market themselves as privacy first, which means they have to actually demonstrate it. They're not in the advertising business and they're notoriously rubbish at AI, so they don't hugely care about your data the way a company like, say, Google does. If you're already in the Apple ecosystem, Siri and HomeKit are genuinely decent option. Don't get me wrong, they're still part of the evil empire, and I'm not suggesting you chuck everything away and go all in an Apple HomeKit, but as far as evil empires go, they're actually half decent. At least in my opinion. What to avoid? I'm not going to spend ages dwelling on the companies I don't trust. There are entire YouTube channels dedicated to that, and I've already done a purchases I regret video that covers some of this, so go check out that video if you want to see who to avoid. One brand I didn't mention on that video though, that I do feel I should quickly mention here, is TP-Link's Tapo products. You might have heard these were decent for local control, and they absolutely were. Once. Their 2025 firmware updates broke third-party integrations, including Home Assistant. TP-Link's official response was to call those integrations insecure and just basically dismiss the whole issue. Yeah, cheers for that. If you bought Tapo expecting local control, I'm genuinely sorry, especially if I was the one who recommended them to you in the past. The community forums are full of very unhappy people, and frankly they've got every right to be furious. I almost recommended them here, dismissing the comments online as your mileage may vary, but I bought a pack of plugs from them a month ago to test it out, and unfortunately the problems are very real. There are workarounds, but they're fiddly and unreliable, and I'm afraid I just don't trust them anymore, so I will no longer be recommending them to anybody else. Right, that's enough negativity. Let's talk about the good stuff. For smart lighting, I'm recommending two brands. IKEA for most people, and Inner if you're fussy about light quality. IKEA has quietly become one of the best options in the smart lighting space, and that surprises people because it's IKEA, the meatball shop that happens to sell furniture, and apparently now really solid smart home gear. Who knew? In late 2025, actually, they got even better. Well, depending on your outlook. Their new Cadgeplatz bulbs support both Matter over Thread and Zigbee. That's dual protocol, so whether you're running a Matter setup, a Zigbee coordinator, or Home Assistant with multiple radios, these bulbs work. They're not locked into IKEA's ecosystem, even though IKEA makes them. The Dira hub acts as a Matter controller and a Thread border router, which means it plays nicely with other platforms. It's not perfect. Some people online mention software bugs, and I've seen complaints about connection stability from a few of you commenting on my previous videos. But for the price, it's a solid foundation if you want a hub-based approach. The bulbs themselves start around £4 to £9 depending on the type. That's proper Zigbee smart bulbs at pretty much dumb bulb prices. And because they support open standards, if IKEA ever does something stupid with their software, you can just pair these bulbs to a different coordinator and carry on. That's the trust thing right there. I'm not betting that IKEA will be perfect forever. I'm betting that even if they mess up, I can still use my devices. That's what open standards get you. I need to say here that I've only used the older IKEA devices, and while I personally have never had issues with them, not everybody's had a great experience. I don't know if IKEA are actually not all that great and I've just been lucky, or if there's an element of user error to consider. If you care about light quality, Inner is worth a look. They're a Zigbee lighting brand that started as a Hue alternative, and honestly in some ways they've exceeded the original. In independent testing, Inner bulbs scored the best colour rendering index of any Zigbee bulb tested. That's the CRI score that tells you how accurately colours appear under the light. They also have zero flicker throughout the brightness range, which matters if you're sensitive to that sort of thing or if you're filming under them. They don't work with HomeKit or HueSync. They need a Zigbee hub, either the Inner Bridge or something like a modern Amazon Echo or a Zigbee coordinator or Home Assistant. They're pricier than IKEA. A pack of 2 run around 20 to 30 quid, but if accurate colour rendering matters to you, they're worth a premium. For cameras, I've got a couple of recommendations. Reolink is my primary recommendation for basically everyone. They're available in the UK and the US. They have a huge range of cameras at different price points, and most importantly, and this really shouldn't be as remarkable as it is, they don't require a subscription or even an account to use their products. Let me say that again because it bears repeating. No account required. I know. In 2025, a camera company that just sells you a camera. You can record to micro SD card in the camera, to a NAS via FTP, or to Reolink's own NVR hardware. The AI detection for people, vehicles and animals runs on device, not in the cloud, although this varies from camera to camera. The cloud services are totally optional. If you want local storage, you can have local storage. They support RTSP streaming and OnViv, which means they work beautifully with third-party NVR software like Frigate or Blue Iris. If you watch my What the Heck is Frigate video, you'll know I'm a big fan of local AI camera processing, and Reolink cameras are some of the best supported options for that. If you do want to use a third-party NVR though, I would probably avoid their Argus range, as those are battery-powered cameras and they don't play nicely outside of the Reolink app. Some of their newer solar-powered ones apparently work well for that, but again, I've not tested them, so I can't recommend those yet. The specific models change fairly often, so I won't get too granular, but their PoE cameras are generally more reliable than the Wi-Fi versions for serious NVR setups. Prices range from about 35 quid for basic models up to a few hundred for their flagship options. I should disclose here that I am now part of Reolink's affiliate program. However, I've been recommending them to people for years, and even the first few recommendations on this very channel happened before they reached out to me. The affiliate scheme is just a nice bonus. I would have recommended them anyway. For a video doorbell camera, the Aqara G4 is worth a look. It works with HomeKit, Alexa, Google Home, and even Home Assistant. It has a local storage option via SD card and ties into the Aqara ecosystem. I'll talk about it in the sensors section. It's about 130 quid in the UK or about $120 in the US. I don't have a video doorbell, so this is not a direct recommendation. However, Aqara have literally never let me down before, so I'm fairly confident in declaring this one a solid choice. I should also mention Amcrest. I've heard consistently good things about them from the self-hosting community, particularly for Frigate setups. I haven't used them myself, so I can't vouch for them from personal experience, but they're worth researching if you want a few different options. This one makes me sad, as Tapo used to be the top of this list. They were decent plugs, it had a decent app, it had solid local control if you didn't mind a bit of tinkering with VLANs and Home Assistant, and they were rock solid reliable. Then, as I mentioned earlier, their 2025 firmware broke third-party integrations and they blamed the users. So that's them out now, which is a real shame, as I've recommended these plugs to many people in the past, and I still have quite a few of them in my house. However, I'm slowly replacing them with the ones I talk about next, and I just can't recommend them to anyone again. To be honest, I generally tend to avoid Wi-Fi plugs and bulbs these days anyway, as too many Wi-Fi devices can really cause problems with your network. So for plugs I've actually used and can personally recommend, I'm going back to IKEA and Inner. IKEA's Tretakt smart plug is Zigbee based, runs around 10 quid and just works. No frills, no energy monitoring, but if you just need something to turn on and off via an automation, it does the job. They've also got the Inspelning plug with energy monitoring for a little bit more. Inner has Zigbee smart plugs as well, typically around 20 to 25 quid with energy monitoring included. Same deal as the bulbs. Solid build quality, works with any Zigbee coordinator, no cloud required. Neither of these are especially exciting, but they work, they're local and they're from companies I trust. I used to suggest Inner for Zigbee plugs all the time, but IKEA are really knocking it out of the park right now. They're really one to watch, as I think they could easily corner the market with their no-frills product and crazy cheap prices. Let's face it, smart plugs are as useful as hell, but they're also boring. I don't need it to do anything fancy. I need it to turn on and then off, maybe with a couple of them monitoring energy. And as a company I trust, but IKEA takes the win here. For sensors like motion detectors, temperature sensors, door and window sensors, I highly recommend Aqara. Aqara is a Chinese company, and I know some of you just made a face at your screen, and that's fair enough. Privacy-conscious folks have legitimate concerns about data going to Chinese servers. I had the same concerns when I first looked at them, but the deal with Aqara is the device is a Zigbee, which means you don't have to use their hub at all. You can pair Aqara sensors directly to any Zigbee coordinator, Sonoff, Conbi, Home Assistant Connect, whatever you like. The data never leaves your network. The sensors just work as standard Zigbee devices with no cloud involvement whatsoever. Because of that, you don't need to worry about them phoning home. They physically can't. Also, if you do want to use Aqara's own hub, their M3 hub does local and edge processing with end-to-end encrypted storage. It even supports Matter and Thread on the newer models, and despite what Aqara officially says about only supporting their own devices, independent testing found that standard Zigbee 3 devices from other bands paired and work fine. I do have the Aqara Hub M3, but my own limited testing found that it didn't quite meet my needs. That's not a mark against it though, I've really not given that device much time, and I've heard of other people having much more success than I did, so it's still worth a look if you want to use a dedicated hub. I should say though that if you use a hub that does have access to the internet, the China of it all comes back into play. It may be that they're fine, I've not heard any problems, but personally it's not something I'd want to risk. The sensors themselves are amazing. Small, well designed, really long battery life, and a good range of options, possibly the biggest range on the market right now. Motion sensors, door and window sensors, temperature and humidity sensors, presence sensors, water leak detectors, pretty much whatever you need for home automation triggers. Prices vary, but you're looking at roughly 15 to 25 quid for individual sensors. Some of the cooler ones, like their millimeter wave presence sensors, run a bit more than that, but they still have some really good pricing. They're available on Amazon in both the UK and the US. Again, I have to mention IKEA here because they have some truly insanely cheap sensors on the market at the moment, like a water sensor for 2 quid or a window and door sensor for 7 quid. They can't yet compete with Aqara on range, and I don't have any sensors set up myself yet, so I can't vouch for their quality, but at the prices they're at, I'd say they're probably at least worth a shot. If you're finding this useful, give me a like and hit subscribe. It really does help the channel, and it means I can keep making videos like this. What's your smart home setup looking like? Are you starting from scratch, or are you expanding something you've already got? Drop it in the comments, it's always fun to compare what we've got. And if you've got any questions about any of the products I've mentioned, or if you just fancy a natter, come and join me on the Foxes Lab Discord server. Link's in the description, or you can scan the QR code right here. For voice control, if you want something that isn't tied to Amazon, Google or Apple, there is finally a proper option. The Home Assistant Voice Preview Edition. This is an open source, privacy-focused voice assistant built on ESP Home. It has dual microphones with advanced audio processing, a physical mute switch that actually disconnects the microphones, not just a software mute that might be listening anyway. All of the processing runs locally on your Home Assistant server. No recordings are sent to cloud servers. No voice data is harvested for advertising. There's no account required. When you speak to this thing, your words stay in your house. It's around 55 quid in the UK from retailers like the Pi Hut or Everything Smart, or about $69 in the US from places like Cloudfree or Droid. It's not on Amazon, so you'll need to order them from specialist retailers. As the name suggests, it's early days for this product. It works, and from what I've heard, it works well for smart home control, but it's not trying to be a general purpose voice assistant like an Amazon Echo, for example. It controls your smart home, that's what it's for, and it does that job locally and privately. If you're running Home Assistant already and you don't need any advanced voice assistant features beyond the basic smart home controls, this is probably the option I'd recommend. Again though, just to be transparent, I recommended the Home Assistant voice because as far as locally controlled voice assistants go, it's pretty much the only game in town that I'm aware of. However, this is not something I've used myself. The voice assistants in my house are all powered by Siri and are either on my phone or on one of the many Apple HomePods dotted around the house. I tend to rely on automations or buttons for most of my smart home actions. I don't really use voice assistants much beyond playing music and occasionally pausing the TV when I've got my hands full. Okay, let's talk about the brains of the operation. Home Assistant is the core of my smart home, and it's free and open source. You can run it on a Raspberry Pi, an old laptop, a mini PC, or the dedicated hardware that Home Assistants sell themselves. You can even run it on a Docker container on a server if you're that way inclined. It supports an insane number of different device types and integrations, and that list's growing all the time. It's open source under the Open Home Foundation, and a lot of the work is funded by Nabu Casa, who are the commercial side of Home Assistant. They do it through optional subscriptions. Nothing's locked behind them, but they do help keep the lights on. Many people, myself included, pay that subscription even though we don't use the cloud services, just to say thank you to the amazing developers who work there. The team themselves and the wider public community behind Home Assistant is absolutely amazing, and the speed at which this software improves that is honestly something to marvel at. If you're a part of that engineering community, then I and many of my viewers owe you a very sincere thank you, and I would totally doff my cap to you if I was wearing one. Home Assistant is not the easiest option for beginners. There's a learning curve, and when things break, you're the tech support. Although AI definitely helps these days. I once spent hours trying to work out why my bathroom lights wouldn't turn on, only to discover I'd typoed bathroom as batroom in a YAML file. I moved all of my automations to Node-RED shortly after that. But if you want complete control over your smart home, total privacy, and the flexibility to integrate basically anything with anything else, Home Assistant is probably where you'll end up eventually. Also, you don't need to write automations in YAML files anymore. They actually have a very intuitive system these days. I've got a whole What the Heck is Home Assistant episode if you want the full introduction, link in the description. If you're going to go down the Zigbee route, you'll need a Zigbee coordinator. This is the USB stick that lets your Home Assistant talk to Zigbee devices. The Sonoff Zigbee Dongle E is my standard recommendation. It's around 18 quid in the UK or $20 in the US. It uses a well-supported chipset and it comes pre-flashed and ready to go. Plug it in, set up Zigbee to MQTT or ZHA in Home Assistant and you're away. It looks like a boring USB stick and that's fine. It's not trying to impress anyone. It's trying to talk to your light bulbs. Different skill set. If you want something more premium, coordinators from Electroalarma or the official Home Assistant Connect ZB2 are excellent but cost more. The Connect ZB-T2 has thread support out of the box as well as Zigbee. I've never had the ZB-T2 myself, but I really want one as apparently it's got amazing range. However, I have had an Electroalarma. Unfortunately, it turns out that it has a major flaw in that it can't be accidentally kicked out of the back of the machine without breaking. I don't know about you, but I want a dongle with some stamina. In its defense, until it was destroyed, it was a great device and I had no problems with it. I would have actually bought a straight replacement, but it's a popular device and it's often out of stock. Any of these will work. The Sonoff Zigbee Dongle E hits the sweet spot of price, reliability and community support, which is why I keep recommending it. But I won't pretend that the multi-protocol features of Home Assistant and Electroalarma devices are not head-turning. I may actually have to rethink this recommendation in the future. For now though, you won't go far wrong with the Sonoff. The only reason why I haven't moved multi-protocol yet is because I've heard that some devices, especially the ZB-T2, are either Zigbee or Thread. You can't do both at the same time, so if you want them both, you need two dongles. If Home Assistant can't do it, I sort of suspect that's true of the others as well, but don't quote me on that. If you're starting from scratch and just want a list of things of what to buy, here's what I'd suggest. A Zigbee coordinator like the Sonoff Zigbee Dongle E, a few IKEA bulbs to get some smart lighting going. Start with 2 or 3 and see if you like it. Add in the car motion sensor and a couple of door sensors to start some automations going and maybe round it off with a couple of IKEA smart plugs. That's enough to get a functional smart home started. No local control, no subscriptions, no mandatory cloud accounts. Again, you'll definitely want more when the bug bites you, but it's best to start small and then grow than it is to spend a fortune only to find out that smart home's not really your thing after all. You will need a hub, and whilst I prefer the more DIY solution of Home Assistant, if you're just starting out and testing the waters, you can easily go with a works out of the box experience and grow from there if you want to. I'd probably go with IKEA or Akara for that. Just bear in mind that my recommendations for both devices are based on reputation, not experience, so I can't promise you it will be amazing. If you want to start really simple, then even an Amazon Echo will get the job done. Just bear in mind the Echo has downsides and is not locally controlled, so do a bit of research first. You don't have to buy everything at once. I started with a hub, a switch and 2 bulbs. We all start somewhere. Those worth it too though. Before we wrap this up, I just want to quickly talk to you about the protocol wars, because this is really not a fun thing for anyone in the smart home world right now, and it can be really confusing to those who are just starting out. Honestly, I'd love to tell you that this gets less confusing as time goes by, but that's just not true. If anything, it gets worse. You've heard me mention Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, and you may think that those are good bets, as those are the ones you've heard of, but where possible, I'd actually avoid both of those protocols for smart devices. Sometimes they make sense. I recently set up a mains-powered Wi-Fi camera in my garden because Wi-Fi was my only option in that spot, but Wi-Fi smart home devices can clog up your network, and often, not always, but often, they're an indicator that the device may require an internet connection to work. Bluetooth isn't terrible, but it wasn't really designed with smart homes in mind. Bluetooth Low Energy, also known as BLE, is pretty decent for things like wearable tech because it's low power and usually close to your phone, but for smart home devices around the house, it's often short range, it can be flaky through walls, and it doesn't scale nicely once you've got loads of devices, so personally I wouldn't bother unless I had a really specific reason to. The other protocols I've mentioned are Zigbee, Thread and Z-Wave. I'm going to do a full video soon about all of the different protocols, so I won't get into this part too deeply, but in a nutshell, my advice at this moment is to go for Zigbee. Now, that might be considered a bit of a hot take by some people, and I do understand why. Thread is the new kid on the block and is supposedly the new hotness. There's another thing you may have heard of called Matter, which isn't actually a protocol, it's a universal language that's supposed to unify all of the protocols so they can talk to one another without having to use something like Home Assistant. And Thread is their pick for the protocol they want to win. Don't get me wrong, the promise of Thread and Matter is amazing, and I truly hope that it gets there, but as with a lot of new standards, there's disagreement between the companies on how to implement it, and frankly, I don't think it's reached a point where I can easily recommend it to people. My house is a mix of legacy Wi-Fi devices from before I knew better and Zigbee devices. I do occasionally check in with Thread and Matter to see how it's doing, but every time I do, I'm disappointed and I go back to Zigbee. As that is my experience, that's what I recommend to you as well. I make this recommendation with a caveat though. It could be that Thread does get its act together and starts to live up to the promise. If that happens, your existing Zigbee devices won't suddenly stop working. Local control do, they'll work till they die, but you may find eventually that Thread devices will come down in price, become the standard, and Zigbee devices will become harder and harder to find. That's not fact though, that's pure speculation. Until that starts to happen, I'll stick with Zigbee. Z-Wave also exists. There's nothing especially wrong with Z-Wave, but Zigbee won that war, so I don't recommend you buy Z-Wave devices today. For the record, I'm not telling you to actively avoid Thread, I'm just not in a place where I recommend it yet. Finally, and then I promise to shut up about protocols, you can buy multi-protocol devices. I mentioned the multi-protocol electro armor coordinator earlier, but there are sensors out there that themselves support more than one protocol. If you can find them, go for those devices. IKEA do quite a few multi-protocol devices these days, and IKEA's newest range of products are apparently Zigbee and Thread. One thing to be aware of though is that sometimes the device will support one set of features on one protocol and another set on another, which is annoying as hell. Generally speaking, my advice is that if you are going to buy a multi-protocol device, just check some reviews first and find out what works and what doesn't. I've recommended a lot of products in this video, but the point isn't really about any specific gadget, it's about the principle. You can have a smart home without giving up your privacy. You can have automation without having subscriptions. You can buy a device that keeps working even if the company behind it makes bad decisions or just vanishes entirely, because they use open standards that let you move to different platforms. The companies on this list aren't perfect, no company is, but they've earned my trust by prioritising local control, respecting open standards, and not holding my own devices hostage behind cloud accounts and monthly fees. That's the bar. It shouldn't be unusual, but right now it is. So next time someone tries to sell you a smart device that requires an account, demands a subscription, or only works with their specific app and cloud service, ask yourself, what happens when they change the terms? What happens when they get bought by someone else? What happens when they shut down? What happens if they decide to just not support your device anymore? The companies on this list, you don't have to ask those questions. The devices work locally, the standards are open, you own what you bought. That's what trust looks like. If you want to dive deeper into any of this, I've got a series called What the Heck, where I give beginner's guides to things like Home Assistant, Zigbee to MQTT, Frigate, and much more. Links are in the description, or there's a playlist here. Links for all of the products I mentioned are down below in a pinned comment. Many of them are affiliate links, but it won't cost you anything extra, and if you use them, it helps support the channel. If you don't use them, no hard feelings, we can still be friends. Ta-ra!